The kitchen smelled of fresh coffee and burnt toast, Tom's specialty. Margaret Walsh smiled as she watched her husband of 47 years fumble with the toaster settings, muttering about modern technology being unnecessarily complicated. Outside their window, the California morning painted the sky in shades of amber and rose. "You know, we put men on the moon with less computing power than that toaster," Tom grumbled, finally extracting 2 slightly charred slices. "But can I get even browning?" "Apparently that's beyond human capability." Maggie laughed, the sound light and familiar. "You said the same thing yesterday." "And the day before. Maybe it's user error, not equipment failure." Tom turned to deliver his usual witty retort, but his face suddenly twisted. The toast clattered to the floor. His right hand clawed at the counter, searching for support that wasn't there. Then he collapsed. "Tom!" Maggie's training kicked in before her panic could. She was beside him in seconds, checking his pulse, his breathing, already reaching for her phone. "Stay with me, honey. Stay with me." The ambulance ride blurred into a nightmare of fluorescent lights and urgent voices. Maggie held Tom's left hand. His right hung limp and unresponsive. His eyes were open but distant, like he was staring at something far beyond the ambulance ceiling. She thought of Apollo 13, the impossible situation, the refusal to surrender. "We're going to get through this," she whispered. "Just like we always do." At Mission General Hospital, Dr. Patricia Okonkwo met them with the practiced compassion of someone who delivered bad news daily. The CT scan results were devastating. Massive ischemic stroke. Right hemisphere. The damage was extensive. "Mrs. Walsh, I need you to understand the severity," Dr. Okonkwo said gently, guiding Maggie to a private consultation room. "Your husband has suffered significant brain damage. The paralysis on his left side may be permanent. His speech centers are severely affected, and cognitively—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "We're seeing minimal response to stimuli. His higher brain functions may not recover." Maggie sat perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap. She'd heard similar words before, decades ago, delivered by different doctors in different hospitals. When her father had his stroke, when her mother faded into dementia, she knew the script that came next. Comfort care, quality of life, letting go with dignity. "What are his chances?" she asked quietly. "Of meaningful recovery?" "Mrs. Walsh, I don't want to give you false hope. I didn't ask for hope. I asked for numbers, percentages, data," Dr. Okonkwo sighed. "Less than 5% show significant improvement from this severity of stroke. Most remain in a minimally conscious state." "I'm sorry, 5%. Maggie had worked with worse odds. She remembered sitting in mission control in 1983, watching a multi-million-dollar satellite tumble out of orbit. The trajectory calculations said it was unrecoverable. Every expert agreed. But she and Tom had stayed up for 36 hours straight, running scenarios, testing theories that bordered on absurd. They'd found a solution with a 3.7% chance of success. The satellite had made it home. "I'd like to see my husband now," Maggie said, standing. Tom lay in the ICU bed, surrounded by machines that beeped and hummed their mechanical lullabies. Tubes and wires connected him to life support systems. His eyes were open but empty, staring at nothing. Maggie pulled a chair close and took his hand. His wedding ring caught the harsh hospital light, the simple gold band they'd chosen together in 1978, engraved inside with coordinates, not of any place on Earth, but of a point in space where their satellite had been saved. Their private reminder that impossible was just another word for not yet solved. "Tom, it's me. It's Maggie." She squeezed his hand gently. Nothing, no response. His fingers remained limp in hers. A nurse entered quietly to check the monitors. "You should go home, get some rest." "It's going to be a long road." "We've traveled long roads before," Maggie said softly. That night, in their empty house, Maggie couldn't sleep. She sat at Tom's desk in their home office, surrounded by 40 years of memories. Photos from NASA missions, framed calculations in Tom's meticulous handwriting, a model of the space shuttle they'd both worked on. She pulled out an old notebook, one of dozens Tom had kept throughout his career, his engineering journals. She flipped through pages of equations, sketches, and margin notes. Then she found an entry from July 20th, 1969, the day they'd met. Watched history happen today. Armstrong's first step. But the real miracle was meeting MC in the corridor afterward. She was crying and laughing simultaneously, clutching trajectory printouts like sacred texts. When she looked at me, I saw the entire universe in her eyes. Found my guiding star today. Everything else is just navigation. Maggie's vision blurred with tears. She closed the notebook and opened her laptop. If there was even a fraction of a chance, she would find it. She began searching: neuroplasticity, stroke recovery, alternative communication methods, locked-in syndrome, consciousness studies. By dawn, she had filled 3 notebooks with research. By the end of the week, she had a plan. She called it Mission Protocol, Return Signal. Because if Tom was lost somewhere in the darkness of his damaged brain, she would send a signal strong enough to guide him home, just like they'd always done. 3 weeks into Mission Protocol, Maggie had transformed Tom's hospital room into what the nurses privately called the command center. Charts lined one wall, tracking eye movements, hand pressure responses, and heart rate variations during different stimuli. A tablet played carefully curated playlists. His old engineering notebook sat stacked on the bedside table. "Good morning, Commander Walsh," Maggie said, settling into her usual chair. She'd started using their old NASA call signs. If some part of Tom existed in there, she wanted to trigger every neural pathway possible. Mission Day 21. Weather is clear. All systems ready for today's protocol. She opened his hand gently, placing a small metal object in his palm. Remember this? The washer from the secondary fuel valve on the Challenger mock-up. You kept it in your desk for 20 years. Said it reminded you that every tiny piece matters. Nothing. His fingers remained slack, but Maggie had learned patience from watching stars. She began the day's routine, reading from his 1975 engineering journal, entries about heat shield calculations. Her voice filled the quiet spaces between machine beeps. Every few paragraphs she paused, watching his eyes for any flicker of recognition. "Mrs. Walsh?" Dr. Okonkwo appeared in the doorway. "Could we speak outside?" In the corridor, the doctor's expression was carefully neutral. "I've been reviewing Thomas's charts. There's been no measurable improvement. His daughter called me yesterday. She's concerned about you." "Rebecca is worried I'm not facing reality," Maggie said calmly. "I know. Are you facing reality?" Dr. Okonkwo asked gently. "Because the reality is that your husband may never return to you, not in any meaningful way. You're here 12 hours a day. You've lost weight. The staff is concerned." Maggie met her eyes steadily. "In 1983, Tom and I were given 72 hours to save a failing satellite. Everyone said it was impossible. The orbital decay was too advanced. But we broke the problem into smaller pieces, tested each variable, refused to accept failure until we'd exhausted every option." She paused. "We had the solution in 68 hours. This isn't a satellite, Mrs. Walsh. No, it's the man I've loved for 53 years, which means I'll work a lot harder." That afternoon, Rebecca visited. Maggie's daughter had her father's analytical mind, but her mother's stubbornness, a dangerous combination. She stood at the foot of Tom's bed, her expression crumbling as she watched her father's blank stare. "Mom, we need to talk about Dad's care plan." "We have a care plan. Mission protocol is—" "Mom, stop." Rebecca's voice cracked. "Just stop. He's gone. His body is here, but Dad is gone. You're torturing yourself trying to bring back someone who isn't there anymore." Maggie's hands trembled as she carefully marked Tom's response chart. 0 recognition during the journal reading. 0 motor response. You don't know that. The doctors know it. The nurses know it. Everyone can see it except you. Rebecca wiped her eyes. "I loved him too. But this isn't living, for him or for you. We need to discuss comfort care, letting him go peacefully." "Your father never did anything peacefully in his life. He fought for every solution, every breakthrough." Maggie's voice was steady, but her eyes were fierce. "I won't surrender," when he wouldn't. Rebecca left in tears. That night, alone with Tom, Maggie felt the weight of exhaustion crushing her. She rested her head on the edge of his bed, still holding his hand. "Maybe they're right," she whispered. "Maybe I'm just a foolish old woman who can't let go." She thought about Apollo 13 again, the damaged spacecraft, the impossible odds. She remembered sitting in mission control, watching the engineers refuse to give up, not because success was guaranteed, but but because the alternative was unthinkable. "Remember when we stayed up all night with the trajectory problem?" she said softly. "Everyone had gone home. Just us and that damn computer that kept giving us the same answer. Unrecoverable. But you said something. You said, the math is telling us what won't work. We need to ask it what might." Maggie lifted her head and looked at Tom's face. "Still distant, still unreachable. So that's what I'm asking now, not what won't work, but what might." She pulled out her laptop and began researching again. This time she focused on locked-in syndrome, cases where patients appeared unresponsive but were fully conscious inside. She found studies about eye-tracking communication systems, about micro-expressions, about the power of familiar music to activate dormant neural pathways. At 2 a.m. she created a new protocol, more focused, more specific. She loaded their wedding song onto the tablet, "Beyond the Sea" by Bobby Darin. They danced to it at their reception in a rented hall that smelled of coffee and hope. The next morning she tried something different. Instead of reading his journals, she read her own diary entries from 1969, July 20th. "Met someone today. Thomas Walsh. Engineer, brilliant, terrible sense of humor. He made a joke about rocket fuel and coffee that was so bad I laughed anyway. His eyes are the color of Earth from orbit, that impossible blue. I think I'm in trouble." She watched Tom's face carefully. Was that a twitch near his eye, or just her desperate imagination? September 3rd. Tom and I stayed late working on lunar module calculations. He brought Chinese food. We ate it cold because we were too absorbed in the numbers. He showed me a photo of Orion. Said that's where he'd want his ashes scattered. I told him that was morbid. He said it was practical. I'm definitely in trouble. There. A definite flutter in his eyelid. Maggie's heart raced. "Tom, can you hear me?" Nothing more. But it was something. A spark in the darkness. She squeezed his hand. "I'm not giving up, Commander. Neither are you. Find another way. That's what we do." She started the music. Bobby Darin's voice filled the room, smooth and timeless. "Somewhere beyond the sea, somewhere waiting for me." And Tom's left eye produced a single tear. It rolled down his cheek slowly, catching the afternoon light. Maggie stood up, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh my God, Tom, you're in there." She pressed the call button frantically. When the nurse arrived, Maggie was holding Tom's face gently, tears streaming down her own cheeks. He responded. The music, he cried. He heard it. The nurse checked Tom's vitals, her expression skeptical but kind. "Mrs. Walsh, sometimes there are involuntary responses, reflexes. That wasn't a reflex. That was my husband." After the nurse left, Maggie sat back down. She played the song again and again. Each time, she watched carefully. The tear didn't repeat, but something else did. The slightest change in his breathing pattern when the chorus played. A micro-tension in his jaw. He was there, lost somewhere in the damaged landscape of his brain, but there. "I've got your signal now," Maggie whispered. "I'm coming to get you, just like Apollo 13, just like the satellite. We're bringing you home." She opened her notebook and began mapping out the next phase. If music triggered a response, what else? Might work? Familiar smells? Touch patterns? She wrote frantically, building a new protocol based on memory and love rather than just medical science. Outside the window, the sun set over the hospital parking lot. Inside room 347, an old woman held her husband's hand and planned the most important rescue mission of her life. The stars weren't the final frontier after all. This was. Week 7 brought autumn to California. Maggie watched leaves drift past Tom's window while conducting her morning protocol. She'd refined it obsessively. 30 minutes of music therapy, 20 minutes of tactile memory work, 40 minutes of reading their shared history aloud. Today she brought something new, a small jar of machine oil. "Remember the smell of the workshop at Johnson Space Center?" She opened the jar beneath his nose. "You always said it smelled like possibility." Tom's left nostril flared slightly. His breathing pattern shifted. "That's it," Maggie encouraged. "You're remembering. The workshop where we built the satellite housing prototype, where you proposed to me covered in grease and holding a torquey wrench. His eyelid twitched. Once. Twice. Then his eyes moved, actually moved, tracking left toward her voice. Maggie's breath caught. "Tom, can you see me?" His gaze found hers. For the first time in 7 weeks, his eyes focused. They held confusion, frustration, but also unmistakable recognition. "Oh, thank God." Maggie pressed his hand to her cheek. "I've been sending signals for so long." You finally picked one up. She'd developed a simple communication system using eye blinks. 1 blink for yes, 2 for no.
"Can you blink once if you understand me?"
Long pause. Then, deliberately, 1 slow blink. Maggie laughed and cried simultaneously. "You're in there. You're really in there." Dr. Okonkwo was cautiously optimistic when Maggie showed her the breakthrough. "It's significant progress, but manage your expectations." "Communication doesn't mean recovery. It means hope," Maggie replied. "That's enough for now." Over the following weeks, Tom's responses grew stronger. He could answer yes-no questions reliably. His left hand began showing purposeful movement, squeezing when prompted, releasing when asked. Physical therapists started working with him cautiously, but speech remained absent. His mouth moved sometimes, forming shapes without sound. The frustration in his eyes during these attempts broke Maggie's heart. "Don't force it," she'd say. "We've got time. Remember when the computer crashed 3 hours before the satellite burn? We found another way to input the commands. We'll find another way for you too." Rebecca visited more frequently now, hope replacing resignation. She brought her father's favorite books, read baseball scores, told him about his grandchildren. "Dad blinked yes when I asked if he wanted to hear about Emma's soccer game," she reported, amazed. "He's really listening." "He never left," Maggie said simply. "He was just very far away." On week 11, Maggie brought something precious, their original mission logs from 1983. The actual papers, yellowed and coffee-stained, filled with both their handwriting. "Listen to this," she said, opening to a page dated March 15, 1983. "This is you writing at 3 a.m. Margaret insists there's a solution." She's probably right. She's always right. "If we can adjust the approach angle by 0.3 degrees and account for solar wind resistance, we might have a trajectory. MC is my North Star. When I'm lost in the calculations, I just look at her and remember why we solve impossible problems. Because someone has to. Because we can. Because surrender isn't in her vocabulary." Maggie's voice broke. "You wrote that about me. And now I'm trying to live up to it." Tom's mouth moved. His face contorted with effort. Air pushed through his throat in a rough, shapeless sound. "It's okay," Maggie soothed. "Don't push too hard," but Tom's eyes blazed with determination. That look she recognized, the same expression he'd worn during every impossible challenge they'd faced. His mouth shaped itself carefully around a single syllable. "Tr." Maggie leaned closer. "Take your time." "Check." Her heart hammered. "Trajectory?" "E." It was barely recognizable, slurred and broken, but it was unmistakably a word. Their word. The code they'd used for decades, meaning, keep going, we're on the right path. Maggie pressed her forehead to his hand and sobbed. Yes, trajectory. We're still on course, Commander." Tom's left hand, shaking with effort, lifted and touched her hair. The gesture was clumsy but intentional. His fingers caught in her silver curls the same way they had 53 years ago in that mission control. Corridor Dr. Okonkwo called it the most remarkable recovery she'd witnessed in 20 years of neurology. "Whatever you're doing," she told Maggie, "it's working. He's regaining speech, motor control, awareness. It's extraordinary." But Maggie knew it wasn't extraordinary. It was just love doing what love does, refusing to accept impossible as an answer. 4 months after the stroke, Tom spoke his first complete sentence. Maggie was reading from their wedding vows when his voice, rough and slow but clear, interrupted. "You were my greatest mission." Maggie dropped the paper. "What?" Tom's words came slowly, each one a hard-won victory. "Every satellite, every calculation, every star chart I did for you. To make the universe smaller so we could explore it together." "Tom." She couldn't see him through her tears. "Your turn to navigate now," he continued, his left hand squeezing hers. "You brought me home. 6 months post-stroke, Tom moved to intensive rehabilitation. He walked with a cane and a limp. His right side remained weak. His speech was slow and sometimes tangled, but he was himself, arguing with physical therapists about exercise protocols, making terrible jokes, calling Maggie his mission commander. On their 48th anniversary, Rebecca wheeled Tom to the hospital courtyard where Maggie waited with a laptop. She'd queued up a live stream from NASA, a rocket launch scheduled for that evening. Remember when we watched Apollo 11 on that tiny black and white television? Maggie asked, settling beside his wheelchair. Terrible. Picture quality, Tom said, his speech clearer now. Perfect view of history. They sat in comfortable silence as the countdown began. 10, 9, 8. Maggie? Tom's hand found hers. Yes? Thank you for not surrendering. She laced her fingers through his. We're a team, Commander. Teams don't leave anyone behind. The rocket lifted off in a pillar of fire and smoke, climbing toward the darkening sky. They watched it rise. 2 old engineers who'd spent their lives sending things into the void and bringing them home again. You know what I learned? Tom said quietly as the rocket became a distant star. The most important trajectory isn't to the stars. It's to the person beside you. Maggie rested her head on his shoulder. Above them, the real stars began to appear, ancient light from distant suns. But she wasn't looking up anymore. She was looking at Tom, his profile in the twilight, his hand warm in hers, his breathing steady and strong. They'd traveled to the moon on paper, saved satellites from the void, calculated trajectories across the solar system. But this moment, this return, this refusal to let darkness win, was their greatest mission. I love you, she whispered. Tom turned his head, his smile crooked but genuine. 5% chance, he said, referencing the doctor's original prognosis. We've beaten worse odds. We have indeed. As night fell fully, they remained in the courtyard, watching the stars emerge one by one. Somewhere above, the rocket continued its journey upward. But here, on Earth, 2 old explorers had completed their most important voyage, not through space, but through the impossible distance between despair and hope. And in the darkness, they'd found each other again, just like they always had, just like they always would. The stars shone down, silent witnesses to a love that refused to surrender, even when the systems failed, even when the odds were impossible, even when the universe itself seemed determined to pull them apart. Because some connections are stronger than gravity, some signals reach across any distance, and some love stories are written not in the stars, but in the stubborn, beautiful refusal to let go of the hand you're holding. Mission complete. All systems home.